Sir. I also have the honor of welcoming a panel of distinguished luminaries from the power sector and partner organizations on the days. We have with us Shri P.K. Pujari, Secretary, Ministry of Power, Government of India on the days. We have the kind presence of Honorable Member CERC, C. A.S. Bakshi, Shri Anand Kumar, Secretary, Ministry of Renewable Energy, Government of India is also on the days. And Mr. Shri R.K. Verma, Chairman, Central Electricity Authority, has also graced us with his presence. And we also have Mr. Michael Satin, Director, USAID India. And may I request now Mr. Michael Satin to begin proceedings with his welcome address.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everybody. I am here on behalf of the U.S. Agency for International Development, Mr. Mark White, who is the mission director, who sends his regrets and unfortunately not feeling well today. But I am very excited to be here in his place, and I wish you all a hearty welcome. Good morning, Mr. Honorable Minister of Power, Coal, Renewable Energy, and Mines, Mr. Goyal. This is the second time we've had a chance to meet each other the last couple of weeks, and I'm very honored, sir. Mr. Bakshi, Member of Electricity Regulatory Commission, Secretary Pujari from the Ministry of Power, Secretary Kumar from the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, and Chairperson Verma from the Central Electricity Authority. And other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, members of the press, my colleagues and friends in the audience. It's a privilege to welcome you today to release the report, Pathways to Integrate 175 megawatts of renewable energy into India's electric grid, a national study. This study, if I may say so, has been a long time in coming, and there are a lot of people to thank. Several of them are in the room today, and it's been somewhat the birthing of a child for many people, and I hope to do justice to speak on behalf of many of those people who have really dedicated large parts of their life to this. They understand not only is the work important, but the collective discussion we have in this room today and the discussions we've had for the last several years around this issue are important to the future of India. Mr. Goyal, this is the second time, as I mentioned, we've had a chance to meet in the last couple of weeks on the subject of energy. And I want to take a special moment, really, just to thank you for your time and your dedication and your leadership on this issue. I was fortunate enough to hear you speak just a week and a half ago at the release of the last study. And your words were moving, your thoughts were provoking, and I think that all of India and the United States that listens to what you have to say recognize that you are the person at this time in history that will help move these important issues forward here in India and perhaps in other places around the globe. I also want to thank all the staff and members at the Ministry of Power. I understand that your time has in many ways been directed and your energies have been spent on helping to achieve these kinds of outcomes. And their benefits accrue to so many people, not the least of which are the people around this country who depend on energy for their livelihoods, for their health care, for their education, and for the important elements that improve their lives and make sure that they live the most prosperous lives that they can. Earlier this week, leaders from our two countries also met in Washington, D.C. They underscored the long and successful partnership between India and the United States, and of course the partnership between our peoples and not just our leaders. Though it was their first meeting, President Trump and Prime Minister Modi's natural camaraderie and mutual respect for each other clearly indicated that U.S.-India relations will continue their upward trajectory, which is why I believe, and the reason for which I'm here today, that this report we're launching is both significant and very, very timely. More than 150 technical and energy experts and modelers from both India and the U.S. met for more than a year to consult, assess, develop a model that can advance our country's shared goal of helping build an India that is energy secure and energy reliant. Energy experts from both of our countries collaborated and undertook grid integration studies at national and regional levels to identify potential grid reliability concerns as India prepares its power grid to absorb high levels of renewable energy. This report, the first part of a two-part series, evaluated the impacts of achieving Government of India's 2022 renewable energy targets and assessed cost-effective actions to improve renewable energy integration. Let me stop for 1 second and finish my reading from the prepared notes and just say that while we all recognize that the goal, the benchmark of 175 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2022 is nothing short of demonstrating incredible leadership in this world where this is an imperative and an important step towards achieving so many things, not the least of which is economic prosperity for our two countries, but certainly correcting the mistakes of environmental impact. It is something that India has stepped up to show itself as capable and with political will and with the ability, the skill and technical ability to do so. We're glad, as the United States of America, very happy to have been a part of this effort and to have helped out and supported this effort in any ways that we have over these last couple of years. But let me highlight that a team from the U.S. Department of Energy's National Renewable Energy Laboratory, as we affectionately call them NREL, and the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratories, along with India's Power System Operation Corporation, or POSICO, worked in close collaboration with the CEA, with the PGCIL, and with participating states. Namely, let me not be remiss in forgetting any of them, because the state governments also played a very, very powerful role in Gujarat, in Rajasthan, in Maharashtra, in Tamil Nadu, in Karnataka, and in Andhra Pradesh. All contributed significantly to this study. The team will, of course, delve deeper into the findings of the report, but the big outcome has been clear. The government of India, with the minister's incredible leadership and vision, has demonstrated that achieving India's target of 175 gigawatts by 2022, if done properly, building on innovative strategies and new technologies, is in fact achievable. And that is something that will change the course of history in our energy and power use, not just here in India, but around the globe. Introducing renewable energy solutions into established energy systems is, of course, a learning process. None of it happens overnight. It's not without some mistakes along the way, but all of it is meant to provoke a learning curve of some sort, steeper in some areas and less steep in others. But it often requires changes to well-established policies and practices, institutions, as well as market structures. Just as the U.S. power system is grappling with a changing landscape and making adjustments accordingly, the Indian energy sector will have to adapt and develop its capacity to accommodate the specific needs of these new technologies and strategies. Today's report helps resolve some of these challenges and questions about grid stability and demonstrates that India's current power system design has the inherent flexibility to absorb variable clean energy. A very, very, very huge breakthrough. Energy is a key determinant of growth, and India needs sustainable energy sources to continue to grow at its projected 7 to 8% annually. In the area of energy, USAID has a long-standing collaboration with the government of India. We have been fortunate to work with the fine people, the incredible technicians, the political leaders, and the thought leaders from the Ministry of Power on a number of collaborative efforts. Last year, USAID and the Ministry of Power jointly designed and launched Greening the Grid, a 5-year, $30 million effort to support the government of India in its efforts to manage large-scale integration of renewables into the Indian power grid in a cost-effective manner. This report has been developed under this very bilateral program. We are proud of our partnership. We believe it speaks incredibly directly to the discussions that President Trump and Prime Minister Modi had this past week in Washington, D.C. We look forward to continued support and engagement in advancing our shared agenda for large-scale integration of renewables into the Indian power grid. Experimentation and change all bring about some degree of risk. We hope that this effort goes a long ways to helping us understand, calculate, and perhaps even mitigate some of that risk. In closing, I'd like to really congratulate again the teams from NREL, from LBNL, from POSICO, and all the Indian stakeholders on completion of the study. I know it's been a long time coming. I know that a lot of people put a lot of sweat and intellectual capacity into this, and I know there were even moments, like any big undertaking, where you thought, wow, will we actually get there? But in fact, we are there. We have arrived. And I'm confident that this study will be used to drive decisions, policy, and action into the very near future. So let me take this final opportunity to thank some key people who played a big role. Let me call out, please, specifically Ms. Jyoti Arora. She's been a longtime partner of our work, but I know she is one of the very stalwart champions of the Government of India in the Ministry of Power, and we could not have asked for any better partner. But let me just say, as somebody who's relatively new here to India, the last 9 months or so in beginning my work with the Ministry of Power, and for that matter in the Ministry of New and Renewable Resources, I am incredibly fortunate to have found a professional class of people with whom I have the opportunity to work. Their names are too many to list here, but let me guarantee you, Mr. Minister, that those folks in your ministry and in the New and Renewable Energy Ministry are fantastic cadre of folks, and I look forward to my next 3 or 4 years to continue my personal engagement with them, but the work that USAID and the U.S. government is doing with your government. The Ministry of Power under Jyoti Arora's leadership has really offered guidance to the Greening the Grid program, as well as to and I'd like to thank the entire POSICO team, particularly Mr. Baba and Mr. Sune, for their cooperation and support. From health to agriculture to clean energy, I've seen Prime Minister Modi's optimism reflected in India's tremendous leadership, not the least of which, of course, is the Minister of Power here with us today. We're grateful to have your presence here. With an enthusiastic and determined team focused on results, I'm confident that India and the United States, our partnership, will move forward in many ways unprecedented that will set a standard for the rest of the world in the area of power and clean energy use, and to achieve the Indian renewable energy targets as you yourselves have set forward, which we now know are achievable. Let me say, Mr. Prime Minister, thank you very much for your presence here today and your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Ladies and gentlemen, as Michael mentioned, Greening the Grid program, under which the study was conducted, has been led and steered by the Joint Secretary, Ministry of Power, Srimati Jyoti Arora. May I request her to set the context for the study and the National Level Report, which is being formally launched today.
Honorable Minister of Power, Shri Piyush Goyal ji, Secretary Power, Ms. Shri Pujari, Member CRC, Shri Bakshi ji, CA Chairperson, Shri R.K. Verma, Michael Satin, Director Clean Energy and Environment, Mr. Jha, Chairman Power Grid, Mr. Soni, Mr. Baba, delegates, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Ministry of Power, I extend a very warm welcome to all the dignitaries who have come to attend today's function. Sir Michael Satin has already explained in detail long partnership India and US has had in the past and is continuing in the energy sector. In particular, the PACE-D program, which is Partnership to Advance Clean Energy Deployment, PACE-D program, under which this study was conducted, the Greening the Grid program, has achieved a great success in the past, and with today's report getting presented, you will see the kind of work which is being done under this partnership. Sir, under your leadership, everybody in the room knows how much effort is being made to make this 175 gigawatt of renewable energy a success. A lot of policy measures have been taken by the Ministry of Power to make this a success, but let me honestly share with you that in 2014, when it was announced, we in the Division of Operation and Management, in which POSOCO is housed, we had a lot of trepidation. We were very, very anxious. We were very concerned whether we will be able to actually have this 175 gigawatt a reality. We were not very confident about whether the power system will be able to balance this 175 gigawatt. We were not sure that there would be adequacy of transmission. We were not sure whether we have enough ramping up capabilities of our generators which will actually make this balancing possible. We were very concerned about the stability of the grid. We were not sure which would be the most, we were not sure how we will be able to, whether we should be going in for regional dispatches or we should be having national dispatches or we should continue with the state dispatches to have the optimized function. We were not sure what kind of regulatory interventions which will be required. So, sir, this study actually answers many of these questions. I am very happy to tell that the NREL and POSOCO, sir, have jointly worked on this study along with system operators, transmission planners from 6 rich states, which is Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, Rajasthan and Gujarat, besides CA, CTU and CERC. There were many stakeholders. In fact, Mr. Satin gave the details, how many meetings. In fact, this is a labor of more than 2 years. The LBNL, NREL, NLDC, RLDCs, power exchanges, NIVE, NTPC, MNRE, PTC, FICCI, Priyas, all the stakeholders were actually, their views were undertaken, their views were taken so that we could have an optimized function and get these studies conducted for going forward. The study has actually given us a lot of confidence. We are confident that the power system will be able to balance this 175 gigawatt in 2022. We are sure that the coal-fired capacity in 2022 will be expected to be adequate to tackle the ramp rates required. And we are also sure that the RE curtailment will be at very minimal level, that is around 1.4%, in line with international experience. So a number of recommendations have been made by this study, which you will just know. Jacqueline and Narasimhan will be presenting that report. So this is just the beginning. There are a lot of recommendations. We are geared up to make those recommendations a reality, sir. In fact, I have kept before you, you have just seen the 9 reports which, along with this 2-year study, we have been actually having a side work. Whatever learnings were there, we were trying to put that in a separate report so that we are totally prepared to take this intermittent and variable power as and when it comes without disturbing the grid and in a very, very optimized way. I'm sure this is not the end and it is just the beginning. I'd like to compliment in the end the efforts made by USAID, NREL, POSOCO, especially Jacqueline. You have been coming many times in the last 2 years from US to here and starting the work coming the next day. So, sir, under your guidance and leadership, Mr. Pujari's guidance and leadership, we've been able to reach here, and I'm sure that the dream which you have seen in 2022 will become a reality. Thank you everyone for supporting this program.
Thank you, ma'am. I request next the lead actors, Power System Operations Corporation Limited and National Renewable Energy Laboratory, represented by Sri S.R. Narasimhan and Dr. Jacqueline Cochran, respectively, to make a brief presentation on the report.
No, I will. No, sir. Yeah. Thank you. It's an honor to be presenting this report. We started out a couple of years back, nearly 2 years, and that time the contours were not very clear. How would we formulate the problem? We were fortunate to have with us modelers from NREL and LBNL who helped us, who have done similar studies elsewhere, and with the support of the Ministry of Power and the USAID. So how exactly did we formulate this problem? We formulated this problem in a simple way. How do we meet the 2022 power demand reliably for each of the 24 by 365 hours with 175 gigawatt RE at minimum production cost? Now, by production cost, I mean only the fuel costs and the startup costs. As in any production cost modeling, the fixed costs are treated as sunk costs, and our attempt was to mimic the dispatch decisions that we would take in 2022. Now, while fulfilling this above objective, we need to honor the technical constraints at the different power plants, the conventional generation fleet, in terms of ramp rate, the maximum and minimum generation, the hydro energy limitation, the transmission system constraints, as well as the reserves requirement. We have held 10 gigawatt of reserves throughout this 8760 hours. And while building this model, how do we get the confidence that this model is realistic? For that, we built the 2014 model and then expanded it. We validated this 2014 model against actual results and then scaled it up to 2022. And for all this, we had an extensive support framework of more than 30 modelers, and we had the support of the Grid Integration Review Committee, which has over 150 experts, and we had 4 meetings, conference calls, more in the initial 1 year. We used the time zone diversity to advantage, and then the draft report came out in February 2017, which we discussed. A number of suggestions were received, which we have incorporated, and the report that we have before us is an outcome of all these deliberations. Now, this report looks at 5 scenarios essentially, the centerpiece of which is undoubtedly the 100 solar, 60 gigawatt wind scenario. And for drawing comparisons, we have also had a no new RE or the base case scenario. And what if we reverse the wind and solar targets? And what if we had an aggressive build out of 150 solar and 100 gigawatt wind? We looked at a couple of sensitivities in terms of regional and national coordination, coal flexibility, 70%, 55%, and 40%. And we also had a look at what if the transmission capability was enhanced on the interregional side, and the hydro, dry and wet year pattern. So as you would see, the study of this granularity, the computation efforts were immense. That is listed in the slides. With this, I would just hand over the floor to Dr. Jacqueline for a glimpse into the results and key takeaways.
Thank you, and thank you, Madam Jyoti Arora, for your kind words and leadership. Mr. Narasimhan described the richness of data in the validation process that went into this model, and what we are looking at on this screen is the results of the model. This visualization, which you have access to, and the link is in the materials that you have, walks through every 15 minutes in the year 2022 to look at how does a high renewable power system actually balance. On the left side with the map, we are looking at summaries of what generation is online at each of those 15 minutes at each state. And this is the type of generation that is used to help meet the balance. We use this results in the simulation to then look at the questions. Where do we have concerns about how the power system is operated, and what can we do to operate this system more efficiently? So for example, we have learned through this study that 175 gigawatts of renewable energy can meet 22% of India's annual electricity demand with minimal RE curtailment. The map on the left shows the amount of renewable energy at each state as a percent of both electricity generated and electricity consumed. And we can see that if the states in the south and western regions are the locations of most of the new renewable energy, that several states are able to meet over half of their load with just wind and solar energy. And as a result of these changing ways of producing electricity, we see carbon dioxide emissions fall 21% compared to a system if there were no new renewable energy compared to today. We also see changes to the daily impacts of the power system. So this chart shows the load in one day in July, a monsoon day in 2022. That's the black line. Monsoon has a lot of wind and solar generation. If we use that wind and solar to meet demand, what we have left to meet by the rest of the conventional fleet is the orange line, what we call the net load curve. We can learn a few things looking at the shape of the net load curve compared to the normal load curve. One, because wind is all through the day and night, we can see at nighttime we need much less coal generation and other types of thermal generation to meet the demand. But then these coal plants and other plants online have to turn down even lower during the daytime when solar generation is up. And then these plants need to turn up again in the afternoon and evening to meet the rising electricity demand at night as the sun sets. And what we have found is that the existing flexibility in the coal-dominated system can manage the variability and uncertainty of renewable energy at all the 15-minute periods in 2022. Another impact of the renewable energy is that coal plants are not operated as much. At average, only 50% of capacity. Let's look at the plot on the left. Each of those dots represents a unit, an individual coal unit, and the collection of dots are all the coal units in India. Where their position is on the vertical axis is what their plant load factor is for each of these units. So we can see that although on average their PLFs, the plant load factors, are only 50%, the distribution is very wide. Some of the plants are very efficient and have low variable costs, low fuel costs, and they operate for a much higher percent of the year. Some dots, though, you can see towards the bottom, either don't start at all in the year or start very little. So we ran a scenario where we removed the coal units that operate at only 15% of their plant load factor. That's 205 units, 46 gigawatts of coal. We found that not only when these units were removed, the average PLF of the remaining plants shifted upwards, but the system was still able to integrate all the renewable energy, manage the variability of the system with the same amount of renewable energy curtailment. So this suggests that a system with 175 gigawatts of renewable energy could support some combination of higher demand growth or retirements. Finally, we looked at strategies to how we could better operate the system. So even though the system operates very well with renewable energy, there are still opportunities to reduce costs and to reduce renewable energy curtailment. And we wanted to understand what the drivers were for those kinds of changes. Let's first look on the left, the cost savings. The biggest driver for reducing costs of operating the system is to have better coordination between the states on the scheduling and dispatch of electricity. When states with one region are better coordination, we can save 6,300 crore annually. We also looked at RE curtailment. The biggest driver for reducing RE curtailment is the flexibility of the coal plants, and in particular, how low the coal plants can turn down. So coal flexibility is important because, as we saw with the net load curve, during the daytime when the solar generation is high, we want the coal plants to be able to turn down to accommodate that solar generation and all the other wind and solar on the system. When coal plants can turn down to only 70%, the renewable energy curtailment is much higher, 3.5%. But if all plants, state and central plants, are able to turn down to 55% and we have access to that flexibility, we see curtailment at only 1.4%. So the takeaways that I'd like to leave with you here today, as has already been said by every speaker, the India power system has significant physical flexibility to integrate 175 gigawatts of renewable energy under the existing plans for 2022. Now, going forward, the challenge, number 2, is harnessing this flexibility. The physical flexibility is there, so how do we have access to this? How do we make sure that the power system operators can get at this flexibility in the coal plants and in the renewable energy generators when they need it? What changes do we need to make to operations, to market rules, regulations? What's the combination of changes we need to make sure that the generators are also have an incentive or a requirement to provide this flexibility? So, for example, we could consider ways at the state level to compensate for coal plants for operating flexibly. That's number 3. And then the 4th point, finally, is that we have found value in additional planning to identify the optimal locations for new renewable energy and associated interstate and intrastate transmission. We dive into this issue more deeply in our forthcoming study being released next month on the southern and western regions. Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here with you all.
Thank you, Sri Narasimhan and Dr. Cochrane. May I now call upon the dignitaries on the dais, led by Honorable Minister, to formally release the report entitled Pathways to Integrate 175 Gigawatts of Renewable Energy into the Electric Grid. May I request Mr. S.K. Sooni also to join us on the dais, please. Ladies and gentlemen, copies of the executive summary of the report will be available at the registration desk and can be collected when we break for lunch. May I now request Shri R.K. Verma, Chairperson, Central Electricity Authority, to provide his perspectives in brief on the subject and the study.
Honorable Minister of Power, Shri Pujari Sahab, Secretary Power, Mr. A.S. Baxi, Member CERC, Mr. Michael Satin, Director USAID, Mr. Jha, CMD Power Grid, Madam Jyoti Arora, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Power, other participants, the entire team of USAID and the media. It's really a great occasion in many respects. Number one, the fear that we were having for a large integration of renewable energy sources is no more there. We were having a lot of questions how the grid will behave with a very large integration of renewable energy sources, and especially the fact that these are variable renewable generating sources. The generation is informed, the generation is intermittent, and it has its own kind of repercussions on the grid operation. And being a grid operator for major part of my life, as close as 15 years, I can understand the pulse where it goes with the frequency fluctuation. It really, I had a number of miserable nights managing the system way back in 1987 when the system used to operate at much low frequency. So I can understand the nuances of grid integration. But it is a satisfying recommendation or the results outcome of the study that the Indian grid is very comfortable in many respects. But then I will not go to the detailing of the presentation. The study has been, the highlights have been presented. We will not, we'll need some more time to go to the detailings of the results. But some points I would like to mention here. Number one, as per the National Electricity Plan that we in CA have worked out, we shall be something like 515 gigawatt by the year 2022 with the expected peak load of 225 gigawatt, and the energy content of RE sources will be something like 20%, which will further increase to close to 25% by the year 2027. So in these scenarios, we had made certain observations. Number one, the grid is sufficient to meet the energy requirement that we anticipate by the year 2022 with whatever we have as of now in terms of existing capacity as well as in terms of the capacity which is under construction. Number two, as far as the balancing capacity is concerned, the fast ramp rate that we envisage and that we think that will be required, we have that system, that flexibility in the system available, and there is absolutely no cause of concern. And it has been confirmed by the study done by USAID also. Now, there are few things which I would like to make an observation here. Number one, with such a high penetration of renewable energy sources, there is a need to capture all this data online. As of now, that kind of availability of online information of the all RE generation is not available in the system. So we need to focus on this area. Second thing is the area which is very weak, and that is the communication system. We must have a very strong communication system because the nuances of this operational part of this high penetration of renewable energy will be huge. It will be a huge challenge. And third, very important area is load forecasting. Load forecasting and deviation settlement mechanism. There is a possibility of all kind of things going on in the system. It's a reality. And therefore, we must have this information available. in terms of load forecasting, this deviation settlement mechanism, communication. These are very essential parts. And with these things kind of throwing challenge to us, the another area which is very important is quality of power. The quality of power, we still have to find answer to this, because there were another disturbing question that with this kind of large DC power sources coming up in the system, what shall happen to the harmonics, the DC power injection, and other issues related to that. Therefore, we need to have monitoring of the quality of power at the different points in this system. So these are the areas which we have to work upon. And last of all, as Jacqueline pointed out in her presentation, the other thing is that in the pockets, not globally, but in the pockets in specific areas, I think we need to run some more load flow studies just to see the efficacy of the transmission and distribution system, that it is properly addressed to. So with these words, I congratulate the USAID, the POSOCO, in particular Madam Jyoti Arora, for steering this study and giving us a comfort that we are comfortable, there is no cause to worry. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Shri Verma. May I now call upon Shri A.S. Bakshi, Honorable Member CERC, to offer his views on the subject.
Respected Shri Piyush Goyal, Minister of Power, Shri Pujari, Secretary Power, Shri R.K. Verma, Chairman CEA, Ms. Jyoti Arora, and Secretary MOP, Shri Jha, CMD PGCIL, Shri Baba, CEO of POSOCO, Mr. Michael Satin of USAID. Good morning. I am really delighted to be here on this occasion. Pathways to integration of 175 gigawatt of RE power into India's electric grid. This report is of great interest to our organization, CERC, because this will help us in formulating regulatory interventions wherever required. Not that we have not already initiated certain interventions, we have already taken many steps to ensure speedy and reliable integration of renewable power into the Indian grid. We have come up with a number of regulations on scheduling and forecasting of RE power, deviation settlement mechanism, operationalization of primary reserves, identification of secondary reserves, operationalization of ancillary services on an experimental basis, and even on compensating coal-based plants for part load operation. These are some of the regulations which are already in place, and Mr. R.K. Verma had raised certain issues about importance of communications in the power grid and the system. Realizing the importance of this, we have already come out with communications, regulation on communications requirement. This will be of great help in integrating renewable energy in a proper way. About the power quality also, we are seized of the matter. In fact, the committee in CRC is already looking into this issue of power quality at different voltage levels, and we are likely to come up with a report on this issue very shortly. The problem mainly lies in states. Central government, we have taken, at central level, we have already taken a number of states, but the same have to be replicated at state level also. Realizing this, we have already, the CRC, not CRC, Forum of Regulators has already set up a committee called Technical Committee on these issues, and it has also taken various steps like coming up with a report called SMUST under the able guidance of Mr. Soni, which we are trying to get implemented in various states. Initially, our focus is on 6 RE-rich states, but later on we will try to get it implemented in other states also. At state level also, we want regulations on forecasting and scheduling of RE power and on deviation settlement mechanism. We are trying to handhold the states on this issue also. We are closely monitoring the implementation of SMUST report as well as the preparation for making these regulations at state level. We have also recommended TSDF funding to the states for implementation of SMUST report on this issue. I sincerely congratulate USAID and POSOCO and Ms. Jyoti Arora on coming up with this report, and I assure you everybody that wherever regulatory interventions are required on the basis of this report, this will be expeditiously taken up by CERC. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sri Bakshi. May I now request Sri P.K. Pujari, Secretary Power, who's been a major force and a guiding light on the Greening the Grid initiative, to offer his insights on the subject.
Honorable Minister, dignitaries and colleagues on the dais, friends. Today is an important day. A very, very important document has been released. The objective that the country has set for itself, 175 gigawatt by 2022, is a challenge, but this report gives us the confidence saying that it is doable, and the type of challenges that it throws up, and which brings in the number of players who will play the role in a uniform and harmonized way, that is the biggest challenge. And the report itself indicates how this will be done. So first of all, my congratulations to the USAID, POSOCO, and all the teams involved in carrying out the analysis and taking out the report. With the help, some highlights of this, many of the highlights of the report has already been presented, so I will not duplicate them, I will not repeat them, but it has a lot of policy implications. So some of the policy implications that I can see at this moment, I like to bring it so that the ministry and all the agencies and the regulators will, I'm sure, will work together to address those policy changes. With the help of advanced weather and power system modeling tools, the study team has been able to explore the operational impacts of meeting India's RE targets and identify actions that are favorable for integration, that has been pointed out. In-depth analysis of how Indian grid will be balanced every 15 minutes in 2020 by minimizing total production cost subject to physical, operational, and market constraint is a great accomplishment. It gives the confidence to us saying that the integration is doable. The study has emphasized on merit order dispatch based on production cost considering the combined effects of conventional and renewable variable cost, transmission congestion and losses, amongst other factors. The study has reinforced our belief that power system balancing with 100 gigawatt of solar and 60 gigawatt of wind is achievable with minimal integration challenges, bringing benefits of reduced fuel consumption and emissions. It is understood that meeting existing regulatory targets for coal flexibility, balancing areas, expanding transmission in strategic locations, and planning for future flexibility are essential for efficient and reliable operation of the Indian power system now and in the future as well. So some of the policy implications and findings that comes out from this study, which is important for the ministry to address, is, and we are aware of this, and I think in the time to come, these issues will be challenged. First is that transmission is the key transmission is the key to electricity market access for renewables. So there is need to give emphasis on transmission, and specifically coordinate RE generation and transmission at the state level to ensure adequacy of intrastate transmission. So this is an area which we need to focus on. Second is the load and generation forecast are crucial, as was pointed out by Chairman CA, for resource adequacy during the operation of grid security. The changing load profile with increasing peak to off-peak and load changeover calls for better ramp management. Flexibility is essential. This is also highlighted, and there is already a lot of work happening on the flexibility. And recently in the SEM, India has joined the thermal power flexibility campaign. So India will be actively involved in making these thermal power plants more flexible. Whatever the technological retrofitting is required, I think the pilot study is on at the moment, and this is an important area which we will be working on. Also, there is a need for a paradigm shift in the tariff design is needed to incorporate performance measures such as ramping, specific startup or shutdown times, minimum generation level, etc., as well as to limit the financial risk. So, as was pointed out by Mr. Bakshi, this issue also is being addressed both by the regulators and the ministry. Suitable incentive mechanism must be evolved to encourage operation of hydro and pump hydro storage. So, this again is an area which we are looking at, and I'm sure that in coming days, this the various issues that comes up from there will be challenged. G2 Greening the Grid initiative offers a toolkit for information and guidance material to support emerging economies like India in defining and implementing grid integration roadmaps from renewable energy. It also sets a platform for deliberations on strategies and activities for Indo-US cooperation, as was pointed out by Mr. Satin, towards energy security and strengthening energy linkages between the two countries. I'm sure the learning that has come out of this will be also applicable to a lot of emerging countries, emerging economies who are going on the path of bringing in more renewables into the system. My best wishes, and I'm sure that with the report on and a lot of work and challenges that has come up, we working together will be able to address. The good thing is that this report shows how closely there is a need to work, all the agencies need to work, and it is also gives us a confidence that it is possible to work together and address those challenges. So thank you so much, and my best wishes for all the agencies, and I hope that they will work together and address these challenges. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sri Pujari. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor now to call upon the Honorable Minister, Sri Piyush Goyal, to offer his insights and advice on the subject for consideration of this August gathering.
Thank you very much, Mr. P.K. Pujari, Secretary Power, for your kind words. Mr. Bakshi, Member CRC, Mr. Verma, Chairman, Central Electricity Authority, Ms. Jyoti Arora, Mr. KVS Baba, Mr. Jha, CMD of Power Grid Corporation, Mr. Michael Satin from USAID, Mr. Soni from POSOCO, both the distinguished authors of this report, Dr. Jacqueline Kochuan and Ms. Dr. S.R. Narasimhan, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Satin, for all your wonderful comments. India and the US certainly share a very, very, if I can use a energy sector term, a very robust relationship. And soon after this wonderful interaction that Honorable Prime Minister and Honorable President of the US have had in Washington, I think it's very appropriate that our joint partnership in the energy sector has come up with one more achievement, one more outcome for which all of the stakeholders who are in this room have been working for so long. And I must compliment the authors and all the other stakeholders, the ministry, the CEA, CRC, other organizations and individuals who have played an important role in making this happen. And certainly would like to thank the USAID for your support, your continued engagement in our various programs in the energy sector. Sitting there and hearing a lot of coal bashing, I was wondering whether if this goes on too long, what happens to my role also as the coal minister? It is a little bit of a contradiction in terms that I have to keep the coal industry also going while I ensure large-scale renewable outreach in the energy sector, and from the power side also maintain that the grid stability and the grid continues to be robust and does not have ever or never ever have a situation of what happened in August 2012. But the good part is that we are all working as a team. We have broken all the silos that used to constrain development of this sector. And today we have Coal India also having its first 1,000 megawatt of renewable power generation in the current year, slated to come up in the current year. And I'm given to understand that Coal India's own ambition is to also generate about 10,000 megawatt, 10 gigawatts of renewable energy as its contribution to a better planet, as its contribution to greening this country and greening the world. So this kind of sensitivity and combined collective collaborative approach really defines the success of renewable energy in this country. Of course, as we are moving towards a new India, I think it's only appropriate that we also plan a new grid for a new India. And as the distinguished authors said, transmission is going to be a key element to the larger rollout of renewable energy in this country. And going forward, I think in different aspects, be it the policymakers, be it the regulator, be it the electricity authorities, be it the grid operators, grid managers, and frankly, even the consumers of this country. All of us will have to get sensitized to the changing scenario of different sources of energy, how different sources of energy play an important role in the overall ecosystem, not necessarily only the value of power or the value of power that we determine in the short run, but the long-term impact of the different sources of power, its pricing, its direct and indirect costs. I think we need an overhaul of the mindset of the nation in this context, in the newer context. In fact, we very often when we are making policy, we also find that most policies, be it in the Ministry of Coal, be it in the Ministry of Power, also in the Ministry of Renewable Energy, are tailored around a mindset of shortages and perpetual distress. And we have to, I think, reorient our policies, our regulations to now work in a scenario where the country is power surplus, the country is coal surplus, renewable energy is not anymore more expensive than thermal power. Certainly in the long run it's far cheaper than thermal based power. After all, who can predict what thermal power will cost 5 years, 10 years or 25 years from now? But one can certainly, based on current pricing, know that we will continue to get renewable energy, be it solar, be it wind, be it hydro, at a defined price for decades to come. And it's only getting better by the day. And in this scenario, the fact that India is playing such an important role in the global effort to address the concerns of climate change, very few countries in the world really are planning over 20% of their energy consumption. In installed capacity, we would probably be 70-80% in the next few years coming out of renewable energy, but 20% of our actual energy consumption coming out of only wind, solar, small hydro. When we add the larger hydro beyond 25 megawatt, which is by and large renewable, and we are already discussing that it should be recognized as such, which is done by almost all the countries in the world. I think a study done by the Ministry of Power has shown that save and except 4 or 5 countries, everybody else considers hydro as renewable, and we are on the path to do that. Once we do that, we would probably be going closer to 30% of actual energy consumed becoming renewable in the next 5 or 6 years. The study has also shown that at peak hours or in occasions, we would go as high as 55 or 56%. Did you also take the large hydro into consideration in that? Or it's only wind solar? So if we take the large hydro, then possibly we could do what happened in Britain for one day, or which happened in where they were 100% renewable for one day in the current year. Or Germany claimed that it went up to 80% at that point of time, I think very soon before the Honorable Prime Minister was there last month. On renewable energy, if we take the large hydro also into consideration, I think this 56% may actually go up to 70, 75, 80% on a nice rainy day. So India is really today moving to global benchmarks. And that has been our approach of this government in the last 3 years. The current government of India and the people of India will not settle for second best. We have to be the best in the world. We have to aim to be the best in the world. We will set our standards, set our goals to be better than anybody else in the world. We are willing to bring in the best of technologies. We are wanting to be a global responsible citizen. We are wanting to leave behind for our next generation a more robust, more sustainable future. And there will be no compromise whatsoever in our pursuit of this goal. The report certainly, as we move towards a better and better energy mix in this country, the 9 reports so far and the 10th that we have launched today will certainly be a guiding force, a guiding light in our endeavors to rapidly roll out renewable energy. I must say, it's a matter of deep satisfaction for me today when I hear the chairperson of CEA mention that when we announced the 175 gigawatt target about two and a half years ago, he was full of trepidation. He was very, very concerned. And I hope I have your permission to quote what you just said. He said, I have been a load dispatcher myself since CA used to handle this task for many years before POSOCO probably took over. He said, after 15 years of actually managing load dispatches, I was a concerned individual when you announced the 175 gigawatts. But today, as I sit on this podium, I am reassured and I am very, very convinced and satisfied that we will have no problem in handling 175 gigawatt of renewable energy. And I think it is this pursuit of the last 2 years, relentlessly done by people like Jyoti, Mr. Soni, as we saw Dr. Narasimhan and Dr. Jacqueline burn the midnight oil and over 365 days of labor. And I would say this can only be labor of love to put in that kind of effort to come up with such a robust story or a robust future in such a short period of time. And I was asking Jyoti that do these 9 reports and what we are releasing today all integrate amongst themselves before they can integrate the grid? And she has assured me that they all work in partnership, in collaboration with each other. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a matter of great satisfaction for each one of us in this room who have contributed to making this happen. Mr. Pujari lays down office as Secretary Power tomorrow. I will certainly miss him. But it's a great and a very befitting, what's it called, a swan song? To a glorious career. And I would like all of us to stand up and give him a standing ovation today for his leadership of the power sector. considering the importance and the growing impact that renewable energy sources of power have had in our country in the last couple of years, I was just informed by Ms. Jyoti Arora that we have mandated that there shall be a central registry of renewable energy sources, for which instructions have already been given out. The mandating of it has already been done. I would urge the regulator to help us make the necessary regulation so that we can ensure that this central registry captures all the sources of renewable energy across the length and breadth of India. And Chairperson CA has assured me that very soon, within a month or so, they will come up with the mechanism by which this data will be captured. Keep it simple, maybe a mobile app on which people can, on their own, feed in the data that the central registry needs to maintain. Data will also be available for the public at large. It will encourage other people to come into the sector. It will help grid managers, load dispatch centers to manage their own plans going forward. It will also help us create a national map on who is doing what, which are the states which are sensitive to this issue. I'm sure the people of India in the years to come will also start voting in elections for governments which are sensitive to the environment, which are caring for the environment. And at that point of time, such a central registry will be an important tool for us politicians to go to the people and say that this is what we have done in our term in office to add to a sensitive and a more sustainable future of India. And this central registry, I think, will become an important tool for policymakers going forward. I'm sure the authors of this report would have benefited very much if we had such a registry. But then for the future, I'm sure this will turn out to be a great support going forward. Another very important decision that the Ministry of Power has recently taken to support renewable energy sector has been that the technical minimum at which power plants, thermal power plants, are allowed to come down, at which they will continue to get their costs. I'm not a technical person, so please pardon me if I make any mistake in the technical terminology, but whatever, that 70% is going to be reduced to 55%. So the technical minimum we are already mandating to be brought down to 55%, so that coal-based thermal plants, as the authors just showed us, can be ramped down up to 55%, allowing greater integration of renewable power into the grid. And already NTPC and the Ministry of Power are in research with the Fraunhofer Institute of Germany to see how we can have faster ramp down of coal-based power. The CA has already mandated that we can ramp down at 3% of the capacity of each plant. So a 660 megawatt plant is permitted to ramp down at about 19.8 megawatt per minute already. But we are working with Fraunhofer. Some project has come up in UK in Radcliffe, where they ramp down at 25 megawatt per minute, which will help the grid managers to do their job better. So coal over the years in the future will have to be prepared for a occasional ramp down to ensure grid stability. But as Chairman CA said, that the best way to provide a spinning reserve for renewable energy is ultimately hydro. Only yesterday evening till the late hours, we have had a wonderful engagement with the hydro sector in India. A lot of good ideas have come on the table. Some of them have been resisted by the Power Ministry. But I have to, after yesterday's meeting, I have not got down to sitting down with the Power Ministry. But a few things we can support from the regulation point of view, particularly transmission. I think samajhne wale samajh gaye honge. But I think as a nation, we will also have to, all of us, work to see how we can make hydro, once again a robust growth engine of the power sector, which will certainly ensure a far more seamless and efficient way of balancing the grid. While I was walking in just a few minutes ago, my friends from the media who never let me down and are with me in every part of my journey over the last 3 years, and for which also I think, I don't know, today is Pujari Saab's day, but one of these days we'll have to, on a much larger platform, acknowledge the role of the media in my own work over the last 3 years, which has truly been phenomenal. I mean, there's so much I've learned from the media, I can't tell you. But they were asking me, what's new today? I mean, they're sick of the same gobi ka parantha every day. So I'm wondering what can be something new for the day. Because I think such important things like a pathway to integrate 175 gigawatts of renewable energy is somehow not catching the fancy of or the headlines in the next day's paper, which is a sad thing. Honestly, the amount of work that goes into all of these, the back end of all these outcomes often gets unnoticed, unsung. And we can't do all these great things for this country unless this back end is secure. I have very often on many platforms said that it's time that the nation actually had at least a column, at least a small slot on television, which speaks about all the good things that are happening, which speaks about all the, and these are very inspirational for other people. You know, when I walked into the room and I saw so many people, I said, my God, in these days we don't get such a large audience for a program. How did you manage to get so many people interested in this subject? It's a great support and encouragement for people who are putting in large amount of effort in preparing the country for a better future. And I think that should get an equally important recognition, which will encourage the next generation, encourage others to play the role at the back end also. Otherwise, for us ministers, it's very easy, one program to the other, one interview to the next. A lot of glory can come our way, but it really is, it pales in significance when you see that each one of the ladies and gentlemen on the dais, off the dais, to make these success stories really happen. And I do hope my friends from the media will not let me down, because I do believe that these are really the backbone of the success story that we've had in the last 2.5 years. A country which permanently, for years and decades, believed that it will always be power shortage, there'll always be coal shortage. Millions of people had resigned to the fate of not getting power. And hundreds of millions were resigned to the fate of not getting 24 hours power. That story is changing. And in that changing story, to maintain sustainability as an important outcome is, to my mind, a huge story. And this will be the path that will help us maintain power prices at affordable prices. End of the day, this is a path which will create jobs for the country. When I was just asking Mr. Pujari, a 4,000 megawatt coal-based power plant, an ultra mega power plant, what kind of jobs can that generate? All the equipment is largely made in automated large plants. The power plant itself, and I've gone to so many plants now, the control room handles the entire plant. Coal handling plants, automated plants are handling coal. Loading, unloading in the rakes or trucks is getting automated. Coal mining activity is gradually, we are improving the productivity on that. Automating wherever possible to keep the coal cost low so that the consumers are not stressed with high power prices, high power tariffs. But compare that to a renewable energy project. I mean, a waste to energy or the projects for which I got delayed, where we are looking at briquetting this rice husk and paddy and using that briquette into coal-based power plants, into making gas. All of these, when we look at the number of jobs that it will generate, direct and indirect, when you look at the amount of money you will be giving to the farmer, instead of burning his coal husk, his rice husk, he'll actually get a value for that rice husk. When you set up 1,000 megawatts or 1 gigawatt of solar plant, making each of those modules, each of those solar equipment, maintaining it, cleaning it, the ecosystem of working jobs has such a huge multiplier effect that itself becomes a social cause or a social reason to encourage renewable energy. I mean, on an apple to apple, if we were to compare the entire ecosystem from beginning to end, in the current day of automation, where at least this government has laid emphasis not on a top-down approach, but on a bottom-up approach, I think renewable energy has the potential of creating maybe 7 or 8 or 10 jobs per 10 times more jobs per kilowatt hour or unit of electricity than the traditional forms of energy has. Maybe if somebody in this room or a group of some of you can do a study on that, that would make for very interesting reading. I was today also looking at, as I just mentioned, at the possibilities of using this waste. And I would urge the regulator and the department to consider, and I'm making this in an open forum instead of my office, that when a coal-based power plant, suppose it uses 10% of these briquettes coming out of rice husk instead of coal, can we categorize that as renewable energy up to 10% of the energy that is produced? And encourage more and more people to use these rice husk based briquettes in replacement for coal. And I'm told that it would be a very good value proposition because the calorific value of these rice husks can go as high as 3,800 kilocals per whatever, kilo or per kilo. So we have to, all of us have to think innovatively and work as a team. I'm only giving this example to show you how together, when each one of us comes up with newer ideas, and these ideas only evolve in discussion and engagement. It's not as if I had planned for it before 10 o'clock this morning when they started explaining to me what they are planning for this problem which we have been trying to address. Can we, and I've also thrown this suggestion to my team this morning, can we look at the manure coming out of gobar, the cow dung, which is truly organic manure and actually internationally fetches a premium valuation. But because it is made in small numbers, it is not getting a value. How can we look at, instead of giving large amounts of subsidy to maybe plants which are set up or required for renewable energy, can we look at some more innovative ways to ensure that we bring down the waste or utilize the waste to generate wealth in this country? One thought that came up this morning, we are of course giving Ujjwala LPG connections to the poor of this country, free of charge. And I'm happy to say my colleague Mr. Dharmendra Pradhan has done some fantastic work in 1 year to give over 2 crore poor women dignity of life through free LPG connection so that they are not at the mercy of wood and coal and other traditional polluting and environmentally unfriendly forms of cooking. Target is to do 5 crores in another year and a half more. Can we support that movement by setting up cow dung to gas plants across the length and breadth of the country, wherever there is a cow shed or a gaushala, and incentivize that gas being bottled into maybe 5 kg containers and provide to all these beneficiaries under the Ujjwala scheme, so that they also get low cost, affordable, localized gas. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the unique and distinctive feature of this government, working to break the silos, working as a team, engaging with each other to make it into India. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shri Goel, for your kind words of encouragement and advice. Now, last but not the least, may I call upon Shri KVS Baba, CEO POSOCO, to extend a vote of thanks for the dignitaries.
Yes, sir, I'm honored to present the vote of thanks. Sir, we are extremely grateful to you, sir. You are always source of encouragement, and you show so much of enthusiasm. Everyone will get more enthused after meeting you and after listening to you, sir. We are extremely grateful to Secretary Sri Pujari Sahab, Member Sri S. Bakshi, Chairperson CEA Ms. Verma, and Mr. Michael Satin, Office of Director of US, for all the support in the study that carried out, and all have brought out. I have to make special mention to Srimati Jyoti Arora, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Power, has always been source of encouragement, motivation and support. We are always indebted to you, ma'am, actually. And last but not the least, our sincere thanks to Dr. and all my POSOCO team, all the touch, especially Soni Saab. And without miss, 2 years actually, sir. All the people who are here, one all, and who cooperate, I mean, likely in this preparation of the report, sir. Thank you all.